All right. We're live. This is exciting. We've got exactly 0 viewers so far, but we've only just begun. And this is the real world. This is Joshua Hathaway here, sipping some exquisite 30-year aged Dongding oolong tea. Oh, broke out the good stuff for this very special occasion of unleashing no bullshit Tung Fu upon the world. Yes, friends, you are here at the inception of this baby that I have been nurturing for some time now. And really excited to share what I have put together with you tonight. A little bit about me and the history of Tung Fu. To get started, I've been pursuing Tung Fu language, the understanding of how language affects our lives and influences our relationships and our capacity to bring our purpose and passion and integrity and values into the world for about 15 years now. And just really been inspired by a lot of different influences, starting with the philosophers in language that I studied in my undergrad, and then just profoundly impacted by training in nonviolent communication. I did a year-long leadership program back in 2005, and then studied holistic psychotherapy for 3 years. Got my master's in psychotherapy. So Tung Fu has as a part of its lineage, its ancestry is definitely deeply rooted in nonviolent communication developed by Marshall Rosenberg. My teachers, particular Inbal and Mickey Kashtan, have helped me to develop this over the years and practice. And Tung Fu is definitely its own beast. It's its own thing. No bullshit communication. That's what we're here tonight to talk about, and I'm very excited. Hopefully you are getting yourself familiar with the controls here. I'm just going to say in advance that this is the first time I've used this platform, so any feedback that you have, please feel free to drop it in either the chat box or the Q&A. I'm going to do my best to respond live to as many of the questions that show up in the Q&A thread as possible. If I don't get to your question, then my commitment to you is that I will respond to you one way or another about it if I can't get to it live here tonight. This is all new for me, so I'm going to just enjoy a few laughs in advance for all of the potential technical difficulties that may arise. I may get kicked off the internet and I have to come back, but I promise I'll be back no matter what. So if something weird happens and the thing just stops for a while, just hold tight, and I'll be right back. So let's just get started with content, because if you want to know more about me, you can go to my website. I'll make sure and pop some links up for that if I haven't already. But really, what I want to share with you tonight is content. I want you to walk away from tonight with some new ways of looking at communication, with some new resources, and some new practices, some practical things that you can start doing every day to start sort of cleaning up your communication process and deepening your connections, your relationships, and having more fun and experiencing more choice and a sense of freedom about how you're showing up in the world and the way that you are responding to life, and really empowering you to start creating the life that you want to see in the world, creating the world that you want to live in through your everyday actions, which start as an inception with these thoughts that we express as language. So a little bit about language. Language has two basic functions: to represent the world in here, and then to communicate that world to other people. That's basically what language does. It represents the world in here, which is not necessarily the world at large. It's the world in here. And then we represent it to other people. We communicate that to other people through language. And no bullshit communication is about both of those things. It's about how we represent the world in here, and then how we communicate it in the most effective, authentic, phenomenological way. That's a big word, phenomenological, the study of phenomena, of what's actually going on right now. And so there are some basic principles. No bullshit is the model, and Tung Fu is the practice of this model. And the model, of course, like any model, is just a story. It's a story about how things work. And one of the assumptions of this model is that the stories we tell ourselves about what's going on in the world profoundly impact our experience of the world and our capacity to respond to the world. And so, if we want to go about changing our thinking, one of the best ways to start doing that is to start changing our words, because our words are the best representation we have about what's going on up here. And we can't always be sort of working with this. Words are a more concrete reality. We can start noticing things about our language and start adjusting, making adjustments and trying new things with language. And once we start doing that, we start finding we can think in different ways. And that's pretty powerful, not to mention the incredible impact it has on our relationships. So basic assumptions of no bullshit communication. First of all, I just want to say that no bullshit is what it is. I don't want to make bullshit the bad guy or the enemy. We don't want to create another bad thing in the world. Bullshit is just, we'll get to a very technical definition of bullshit in a little while. But what I don't want to do in our no bullshit communication process is to disparage utterly bullshit, because bullshit is fun and we do it a lot. And it has fantastic uses, and it has limitations, like anything, like any sort of set of rules, any game that we play. Our bullshit has limitations. So what tonight is designed to do is to give you choices, to be in choice. Do I want to be running bullshit, or do I want to be doing something different? And what does something different look like? It's concrete, actually. So some basic assumptions of no bullshit communication. Number one, most importantly, I am 100% responsible for my experience. That's fundamental. When I take 100% responsibility for my perceptions, for my feelings, for the stories that I'm telling myself, and the actions that I take in the world, then I am creative and I'm making the world that I live in. And so this is going to be a theme. We're going to come back to this theme and we're going to focus on it in a little while. But essential to this process is taking 100% responsibility for my own experience and 0% responsibility for anybody else's experience. Related to this is that we're all dreaming our own dream. I'm dreaming my own dream. You're dreaming your own dream. We make a false assumption that we're all dreaming the same dream, when actually our dreams are distinctly different. And when I am inhabiting my dream with radical responsibility and vitality, then my dream is empowered, and it actually has gravity, and it impacts the dreams of others in ways that are pretty radical. And we'll talk more about this taking responsibility thing. One of the other essential assumptions of no bullshit communication is that every human being on the planet comes in with the same basic set of needs. We call them universal human needs. And it doesn't matter where you're born, everybody needs nourishment. Everybody needs air. Everybody needs water. Everybody needs some form of shelter. Everybody needs also maybe a little lower on the hierarchy of needs, or higher, depending on if you're talking about a pyramid scheme or what. Everybody needs community. Everybody needs a sense of belonging. Everyone needs communication. Everyone needs to trust that their needs really matter. Everyone needs self-expression. So these universal human needs are a fundamental component of no bullshit communication and a fundamental sort of way of seeing the world. Because when I recognize that everybody is operating on the same basic set of needs, and that even though their strategies may seem rather tragic to me, they may bring up a lot of pain for me, I can always come back to our shared humanity, that this person is doing their absolute best in this moment, like we all are all the time, to get their basic needs met. So the simple essence of this is we are all doing our very best in every moment with the resources that we have available to us in that moment to meet our basic universal human needs. That's it. And that's the basis of compassion. That's the basis of compassion. Another fundamental tenet is that you are always in choice. You're free. You have choice. But choice depends on actually knowing that there are options. And that's why we're here, to talk about some of the options. Another sort of fundamental assumption of no bullshit communication is that there's actually enough. There is enough. It's the abundance principle, that there is plenty for everybody. It's not a matter of whether there's a scarcity of resources. It's a matter of how we allocate, how we distribute, how we share our resources. Fundamentally, there's always enough. And that conflicts arise not at the basis of needs, but at the basis of the strategies that we use to get our needs met. So we'll get more into that as we focus in. But those are some of the basic assumptions of no bullshit communication. And again, no bullshit communication is a model. And just like any model, it's a map. It's not perfect, but it's a set of guideposts. And then Tung Fu is the practice of the model. Okay, so we're going to get into some of the practical applications as we talk about the model itself. But let's move on to discussing getting a slightly more technical definition of bullshit when it comes to no bullshit communication. So, a technical definition of bullshit. I'm going to run through a few of these categories of bullshit, and then we're going to talk about the alternatives for each one of these in more depth. But first of all, it's good to know what I mean when I say bullshit. And again, bullshit's not bad. It's great sometimes. It's a lot of fun, but it's good to have options. So one pretty prevalent form of bullshit that happens in the world is what I call generalization or projection, okay? So this is story. This is story bullshit. Bullshit is pretty much always happening at the level of story, okay? My story about what's going on. So when I generalize things, when something happens and I overgeneralize it, then I'm bullshitting. And if I'm swallowing my own bullshit, then I'm probably suffering. If I'm spoon feeding my bullshit to somebody else, then they're probably suffering, and the relationship is probably suffering. So we definitely don't want to be spoon feeding bullshit, period. Another form of bullshit is blame. Blame is some serious bullshit. Blame is the key to being a victim in the world. A key to disempowering ourselves by making our experience about what somebody else is doing or a situation. And we're going to get into some really fun ways of getting out of the cycle of victimhood and blame. Demands is another form of bullshit. Having demands making demands upon the world as though the world owes you something or any particular person owes you something. That is some insidious bullshit right there. Right alongside demands are unexpressed expectations and vague wishes. So we have demands. The world owes me something. We have unexpressed expectations, which is kind of a hidden demand. Like, you owe me this, but you should already know, so I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just going to expect it from you and be angry with you or be bitter or be resentful if you don't give it to me. And then there's vague wishes, expressing things that we want without actually asking for what we want. And then there's this whole set of bullshit. There's like a whole category of bullshit. These are general categories of bullshit, and there's all kinds of examples we can give for each one, and we'll get into that. But there's a whole category of bullshit that I call making it about you. And the essence of this bullshit is when somebody brings something to you, they're sharing something with you, then you make it about yourself. And you go into your story about your experience, or you minimize their experience, or in many different ways, you do the opposite of actively listening and receiving and empathizing with somebody when you make it about you. And that's a whole nother category of bullshit. So let's dig in. Let's dig into this right here and now and start talking about how to practice Tung Fu and get ourselves navigating away from it and into the alternatives. And by the way, I don't expect you to believe what I'm telling you. That's not what this is about. I'm hopefully giving you some options so that you, in your own life, can do some experiments, some radical empirical experiments of your experience as you play with these different ways of thinking and expressing yourself. So, the assumptions, if they're new to you or not intuitive to you, see if you can use them as sort of running hypotheses for a little while so that you can run some of these experiment data. Because this is, again, it's about practice. And this way is about practice. Right now, you're a movie. You're not going to walk out of this Tung Fu. You're going to have something on, and that's sweet. And I hope that it nourishes you ultimately to have these amazing ideas transform your relationships in your life. Requires you to actually practice. And we'll get into a little bit more what that means, what that looks like. But we'll do it in context. So let's I can't stop playing with my mustache. It's itchy. Let's get into the first form of bullshit and how we practice some Tung Fu with that. So generalization, projection, storytelling. Okay? I would love it. I meant to say this earlier. If you have pen and paper in front of you, fantastic. If you have actually gone to my website and downloaded the needs list and the feelings list and the Tung Fu softener worksheet, you're a fucking badass already. I'm stoked because this is gonna be even easier for you. If you haven't, no problem. And if you want to, great. The links are there on the Facebook page and on the Google Hangout. It's all there if you want to take a look at it and grab that stuff. It may make things, but it's not essential. So I want to invite you, because we're going to work with this. We're going to work with something that's real for you, and we're going to apply these principles to your actual life and an actual relationship and an actual interaction. So I want to invite you to take a moment to think of somebody who you've got some with. I want you to think about somebody you have something going on about. You got some bullshit sort of in between you. There's something up. You've got some feelings. You're not quite right here. There's something up. I want you to think of this person, and I want you to write a few lines. And if you don't have pen and paper, then you're just going to be tracking it all in your head, which is good practice. But I want you to write a few lines about your situation with this person, 2 or 3 lines. What's your story about this person? How are they being? And what are they like? And why is this a problem? Okay. What's the problem here? Could sound like, well, Joe is being an asshole because he hasn't shown up like 3 times to my my bullshit, no bullshit communication events, and he keeps saying he's gonna. So just write out, give yourself like some room to just fucking judge. There may be somebody here, some people here have had some training in nonviolent communication, and you're not supposed to judge people. And I say, fuck that. Like, what's really important, actually, bullshit is really sort of juicy stuff. But it's just not meant to be swallowed whole. Like, it's great. We need it. And we're gonna process it. We're gonna compost this bullshit into some really nourishing compost that's going to help our garden grow better. So give yourself like the opportunity, just let loose, like say it like it is for you about this person. Take a moment just to cut loose with your story. Now, our stories typically include these things called interpretations and generalizations and projection, okay? And the best way to trim that out of our process is to talk about the facts or observations, okay? Because our generalizations are often filtered through our interpretive apparatus, through our past experiences, through our core belief system, and all of these things that tend to tint the world around us. And so when you can make observations, when you have the capacity to make an observation, it takes some of the projected content out of it. Hopefully all of the projected content out of it when you're actually making an observation. What is an observation? First of all, an observation is what the camera would catch if it was watching. Okay? So we often will make generalizations like, you never do the dishes. You left the room a complete fucking mess. You don't love me. You never listen to me. You always interrupt me. Okay? These are generalizations. These are interpretations. We also say things like, she's out to get me. She's manipulating me. So these are also interpretations. The camera will never catch a pattern. It's just going to catch what happens. It's empirical. It's the what actually happened. The camera's never going to see somebody's motivations or their thoughts. The camera is just going to catch what happens. So in the case of you never do the dishes, let's take what we've written right there on our piece of paper and start translating that. If it's you never do the dishes, think of one time when this person said they were going to do the dishes and didn't, the last time this happened. If it's the room is a total mess, let's actually make the observations. What does that look like? Oh, well, there's some clothes on the floor. There's a dirty plate and cup on the table. There's lots of mud tracked across the carpet. There's mud on the carpet. There's clothes on the floor. There are dirty dishes on the table. Those are observations. Okay. Now, having the capacity to make observations is pretty amazing, both on the internal level and on the external level. When I make observations instead of generalizations, two amazing things happen for me. Number one, I stop globalizing things. I stop making things bigger than they actually are. I come to the actual thing, the observation, the what happened. So I do this with my clients all the time. My client will come to me and say, my life is falling apart. My relationships are falling apart. And I'll say, well, what's your observation there? And we'll get to it, and it'll be like, oh, well, my sister is not talking to me, and my friend hung up on me the other night. And now, isn't it so much less overwhelming to recognize that your sister's not talking to you and your friend hung up on you than it is to have this sense that your relationships are falling apart? So that's one gift you give yourself when you can make an observation instead of a generalization, is you actually, things become concrete realities that can actually be dealt with. The other thing is you're seeing more clearly. You're seeing the what is. If you have this big story about somebody, but you don't have an observation, like a single observation to back it up, that's really interesting feedback, isn't it? Because we tend to tell ourselves stories about the world, and these stories color so much of what we experience. So the thing that happens in the relationship, oh my gosh, it's incredible. When you go to have a difficult conversation with somebody, or even a not particularly difficult, but especially when you want to have a difficult conversation about the dishes or about the cleanness of the room or about some other heavy things that you may be feeling frustrated or resentful about. When you can start by making an observation, you potentially start at a place where you and this person can meet. Now, I want you to notice what happens in your mind when I say to you, you never do the dishes. What happens? What's the first thing you think of when I say you never do the dishes? The first thing you think of is the last time you did the dishes. So if I'm over here saying you never do the dishes and you're like, well, I just did the dishes, then we've already started this conversation in opposite corners of the ring, and it's going to be a fight. People are far less likely to take an observation so quickly as criticism, much more likely to be able to be open to hearing what you have to say when you make an observation. And that's really important. It's really important. One of the things that it's pretty easy to distinguish between an observation and an interpretation. It's mostly pretty intuitive. If you have any questions or are struggling with how to make an observation out of a story that you have, then I want to welcome you to just shoot me a little message in the questions section. Or if you're watching this on YouTube and we're Facebook friends, shoot me a Facebook message and tell me what tell me what you're struggling with here. If you have any questions about observations, please feel free to shoot them over. But it's very common when we're making generalizations to use the words always or never. And it's very unlikely that those words will be included in an observation. So we can make observations like, the last 3 times you said you were going to do the dishes this week, they didn't get done. Or you said you were going to do the dishes this morning and they're still dirty in the sink. So those are observations. You never do the dishes, or you have a pattern of not doing the dishes, or you hardly ever is still this interpretive quality that tends to block connection when we bring a conversation about these things forward. So get that bullshit out and get some facts. Start with the facts. It's so refreshing, and it's a potential point, powerful point of contact. All right. So the best way, the best tongue feel you can use, and I want to encourage you to start noticing when you use the words always. I want you to start noticing when you are making interpretations, and just notice the difference. It starts with awareness. It starts with awareness, and it starts with recognizing that this is a habit of mind, and that there is an alternative. So start noticing the alternative. Start noticing when you're making interpretations, generalizations, and telling story about what's going on. It's a radical awareness practice. So the next bullshit that I'd like to address and share some strategies around is blame bullshit, victimhood bullshit, because this is pretty prevalent. And I think that the more aware we become of the possibility of radical responsibility, the more fine-tuned we become to those moments when we're taking the victim role. And there's a very sort of basic litmus for playing the victim. And the litmus is, if I'm telling myself that the feelings that I'm having, the experience that I'm having, is because of somebody else or because of some situation, then I'm playing the victim. And this has been an exploration for me, a long-term exploration for me, because I've been working with these principles for a long time, and they just reveal such stark contrasts everywhere I go. But I have a little song that I made up that I'd like to share with you that helps me recognize and kind of come back with a little humor and compassion to myself when I recognize that I'm playing the victim. And the song goes like this. VICTIM, I feel this way because of them, a victim. A victim. VICTIM, I feel this way because of them, a victim. I'm a victim. Try again. VICTIM, I feel this way because of them, a victim. I'm a victim. So that's a silly song that I love to sing to myself when I catch myself making my experience about somebody else, what somebody else is doing, like getting all resentful, getting all angry, getting all whatever about what somebody else is up to, really getting all tangled up in somebody else's dream and giving away my power to that person. When I blame somebody else for my experience, I hand them my power. I have no control over that person. If they're responsible for my experience, then I'm fucked. So how do we get out of a cycle of blame? It's actually a fairly practical process. Number one, most important thing is proper use of the F word. That's right. Because most people don't even like to use that word, in common conversation. But our feelings are actually an incredibly important part of our experience, very important part of our process, important feedback about the world. And so when we can identify our feelings and actually talk about feelings as in emotions, we're on the road to taking ownership for our experience. Now, when I am saying feelings, I'm talking about emotions. There's a great list of feelings. You can go to my website and download the list. But I'm talking about emotions: sadness, joy, excitement, exuberance, resentment, frustration, anger, anxiety. There's all of these amazing feeling words in our language. Many of us have a relatively impoverished vocabulary of feeling. But the more we actually start using words of feeling, the more we develop that vocabulary. Having that feeling list is a great resource for developing your vocabulary of feeling, to actually point to an experience and be like, wow, I'm feeling wistful right now, or I'm feeling giddy in the moment. So that's the first thing. And what we often do, instead of talking about our feelings, is we talk about our thoughts, but we use the F word. That's what I call flagrant misuse of the F word. When I'm like, well, I feel that we should do this, or I feel that you're being manipulative. Is that a feeling? No, it's not. It's a thought. It's an interpretation. It's a story that you're telling yourself. So let's distinguish between the stories we tell ourselves and the feelings that we have. Using feeling language. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel disappointed. All right? These are feelings. Now, the key to this whole model, the thing that we're going to do to take ownership of our experience and not blame it on somebody else, is instead of saying, I feel angry because you blank, or I feel angry because they ... we own it. We connect our feelings to our values and our needs, to my value and my need. So hopefully you've downloaded the needs list. I've named a few of them already, but we are all hardwired with basic needs. Needs for connection, intimacy, belonging, trust, creative self-expression, sexual expression. The list goes on, to trust that our needs matter, to be heard, to be seen, needs for understanding and clarity. All of these are actual human needs. They're abstract in a certain sense because they don't rely on any particular strategy. They're like an open book, a possibility, just like my hunger doesn't depend on any particular kind of food. My need for nourishment could be met by a burrito or a pizza. I don't need burritos or pizzas. I need food. The burrito or the pizza is my strategy for that, to get that need met. In the same way, I can acknowledge that I have needs for belonging that could be met by going to ecstatic dance, or could be met by hanging out with my family, or could be met by having an intimate night with friends, or could be met by going to a big musical production or show, right? That one need, belonging, could be met in so many different ways. So when I say I feel frustrated because I really value connection and communication, I'm owning my shit. I'm owning my shit. I'm pushing the bullshit out of the way, and I'm owning and connecting and sharing authentically what's up for me. So when you interrupt me, I feel angry because I really value communication and being heard. I'm not making this person wrong. I'm not saying there's a such and such. I'm not going into my bullshit. I'm going into the just reality of the situation. I'm owning my shit, saying, this is what's up. So we connect our feelings to our needs, not to some situation out in the world. That's a recipe for victimhood and blame. We always connect our feelings to our own needs. And guess who's in charge of getting your needs met? Yeah, that's right. We often make other people responsible for meeting our needs. And that's a dangerous bullshit right there. That's a recipe for being up bullshit creek without a paddle. Because we don't have any control over other people. As much as we like to imagine it, and as many strategies as we have been conditioned with, been handed to manipulate other people to get our needs met, ultimately we do not have control of others. So this whole process of nonviolent communication really can come down to taking radical ownership of your experience. It's not about what you can make happen out there in the world. Although, like I said, when you are vitally inhabiting your own dream, when you're owning your stuff, when you're showing up authentically and giving people authentic feedback about your experience, there's a gravity, there's an essence to your being that can transform any interaction into a possibility for growth, into a process of discovery and transformation. And that's what happens when you get the bullshit out of the way and you get real and you practice the Tong Fu. All right. So that's how we address this whole blame victimhood thing. So we've got generalizations. Instead of generalizations, we make observations. Instead of blaming other people for our experience, we talk about our feelings, as in our emotions, this vitally alive, radical, and always present aspect of our humanity. And then we connect that to a need. So if you haven't already done so, I want to encourage you to take a moment to look at this situation that you talked about, and this person that you have been some stuff with. You've got your observation. Now, what's the feeling that comes up when you see that observation? How do you feel? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel angry? Do you feel scared? Do you feel sad? How do you feel? when you witness the observation that you wrote down. And what beautiful need of yours, what precious need of yours is not getting met in that interaction, in that situation? Is it a need for respect, consideration? Is it a need for beauty and order? Is it a need for connection? Is there a need for trust not getting met there? Is there a need for care? A basic communication? What's the need? What's your need that's not getting met? Because that's going to be a really important thing to get clear on before we take the next step in the process. Because the next thing we want to address in this process, and God, every part of this model, sometimes when I talk about it, every part of this model feels so vital and feels so potentially transformative. I mean, it's subtle. It's taken me years to appreciate the power of what observations can do, but they really do cut through the bullshit in just an undeniable way. When you can make observations just today. I had a good friend help me come back to my observations when I was caught in my own story. And I've so appreciated that. It so helped me get clearer about how I had globalized this phenomenon in my life and was really sort of panicking about it when it was really a much leaner, more workable experience. But expectations and demands, boy. This is some frustrating bullshit, all right? Because this is about how we use our power. This is about actualizing our power in the world. And when we're in blame mode, a lot of our power is either we're cut off from it completely and we're disempowered because it's some process or phenomena that we have no power over that's controlling our experience, or it's a person and we're using our power and resources to try to make that person different or behave differently, which is typically either fucked up or an exercise in futility, because essentially everybody's on their own path, having their own dream. And if that person's really fully in choice about helping you meet your needs, then you don't have to exert any power or force to get them to do it. But if that person's not in choice, then you have to go into strategies of manipulation and coercion, right? We all know what that looks like. And coercion is a form of demand. Threat is a form of demand. So we all know what it's like to demand, right? And we all know what it's like to be hit with a demand. And here is a fundamental polarity about demands, a fundamental relationship polarity that you have to be aware of if you want to really get a hold of your power in the world. And that's that every single time you're hit with a demand, this is a human response. And I'm speaking in generalization right now, so I'm bullshitting you right now, but it's valuable bullshit. So listen up, motherfucker. When you hit somebody with a demand, you basically split them into two possible options. Option one, they rebel against your demand. They meet needs for dignity and for choice and autonomy, and they rebel against the demand. Or number two, they submit to the demand. They meet needs for harmony and ease and some kind of comfort, maybe. But when we make demands, we basically give people two options: submit or rebel. That's it. And even if the person wants to do what we are demanding of them, we actually create traffic for them, because they're like, can I do this? Because if I do, it's a demand. So if I do it, then I'm like going against myself, or I'm like being a tool, or whatever stories they might have, right? So we create extra traffic when we create demands in our lives. And this goes for parents, this goes for bosses, this goes for lovers, this goes for all of us in any situation. When we are bringing demand energy, then we are evoking resistance of one kind or another. And demand energy doesn't have to be, oh, we can make plenty of demands saying please. So it's not about the words, it's about the essence of what you're bringing, the energy. Are you attached to this thing happening? Is this person doing this for you in this moment more important than the quality of the relationship? Because what happens is when we coerce, when we make demands, even if we get what we want in the moment, we're causing collateral damage in the relationship. Even if we get what we want in the moment, the cost is conscious or unconscious resentment that's going to come back in sideways somewhere along the way. So we really have to be conscious about our use of demands. We often have hidden expectations in our relationships as well. And it can be a really enlightening process, especially in an intimate relationship, to surface some of the sort of existing expectations that haven't actually been explicitly agreed to. One of those expectations can be you are the Uber strategy for all of my needs getting met, dear partner. And we make our partner responsible for so many of our needs. And that is some really detrimental bullshit. So if you notice that there are some demands, some hidden demands in your relationship, I highly recommend taking some time to review those and surface them. So what do you do instead of demanding shit? This is the fun part. You ask for shit. You actually ask people for things. You ask people for very specific things, because there's a whole world to be explored around asking for shit and asking for doable shit, because people actually often really want to give you what you need. And it's amazing when you ask for something that's doable, how wonderful it can feel for people to give it to you. And I'm sure you've had the experience of being asked for something that you could give, and how wonderful it felt to be able to give it. So I want to talk about doable requests, though, because the doability of a request is where the creativity and the concreteness and the real magic happens. Because people will often make requests like what I call personality requests. Will you just be more aware from now on? Or will you be nicer? Will you listen more? And these, as much as somebody might want to give you what you're asking for, are actually impossible to give. I could commit, yes, I'll be nicer. Yes, I'll listen more. But that's not actually a guarantee, or not necessarily going to contribute to me actually listening more. And in fact, I might have resistance that I'm not even aware of in your asking for that, because I feel like you're criticizing me, or that you're telling me I'm not good enough. That's how it works. But when we recognize what our need is, and we recognize what a doable request looks like, we can start asking for things that may contribute to our need getting met. It may not get it met in one fell swoop, but it may actually contribute. And it goes back, honestly, I want to say this, it goes back to making observations. Because when I can make a single observation that of a single thing that happened, maybe I have this story and I'm convinced that there's this pattern, my partner never does this, or my partner always does that, and I have this story that that's how it is. If I bring that to my partner, the likelihood of us working out that long-standing pattern and sort of fixing it in one conversation is probably about 0, right? So we're probably going to both end up hopeless, frustrated, and our needs not getting met. But if I can come up with one example of when that happened, and we can address that one example and talk about it, we may actually be able to come up with a strategy to resolve the example, the concrete observable thing that happened. So this is about doability. It comes back to doability and the concreteness of the requests that we make. Because I may not be able to fix my partner's apparent resistance to doing the dishes, but maybe we can come up with, I can get a little bit of information and we can come up with a strategy that's going to help me get my needs met for tonight. And so doable requests. Number one, they're framed in positive language. They are doable. You can't do a don't. Asking for what you don't want is not typically a recipe for getting what you do want. So being really clear, what are you asking for? I used to work with kids all the time, and I hear people working with children, parents and teachers. I have my own 14-year-old son, and they'll say, stop doing that, or stop touching each other in line, and what I would do is I'd say, all right, everybody, please put your hands up in the air. Okay, please stand directly behind the person in front of you. If you are asking them for a concrete behavior that isn't the behavior that you don't want, then you're getting a double bonus, because it doesn't create this weird sort of cross signal in their heads about, wait, if I can't do that, what should I do? And it just makes it so clear. And with kids, obviously, it's also more fun when you're asking for specific things that are the kinds of behaviors you want to see happening. It can become a game. And if anybody out there thinks that we are anything but kids with old bodies, we should have a conversation. So making concrete, doable action requests, okay? When you're making an action request, you're asking for a specific behavior now. And the fun thing is you can ask for anything you want. And maybe they'll do it or maybe not. But you can come up with an agreement. Maybe it's the dishes. Would you be willing to do the dishes before you go to bed tonight? Yes or no? We're both going to know, in the morning at least, whether they did what they said they were going to do. It's concrete. It's not just, yeah, I'll do the dishes. That's a vague sort of like anytime kind of situation. Yes, I'll do the dishes before I go to bed tonight. Boom. Or let's say, for instance, for the third time this week, somebody's come in the house and tracked mud into the house when they walked in the house with their shoes on. A non-doable request would be, can you please never fucking do that again? That's not doable for several reasons, right? Number one, I'm asking for something I don't want, right? You can't do a don't. Number two, as much as they would love probably to meet your need for order and beauty by not tracking mud in the house ever again, even if they agree to it, it doesn't mean that they're going to actually be able to do it. And it doesn't mean that they're agreeing to it is even going to help. So an action request in this case would be something like, would you be willing to take a moment and practice taking your shoes off when you get to the front door 3 times for me? Would you just take 3 or 4 minutes to practice coming up to the door and taking your shoes off and putting them on the rack before you go in the house? Now, repetition is how we learn, all right? That's why Tung Fu is what it is. It's a practice of these things, and we'll get to that in a little while. But repetition is what helps us learn. Ideas don't typically help us learn as much as doing and repetition, right? So I love, especially with children, but with anybody, asking for what I want in concrete terms. If we've had a blowout, my partner and I ask for a do-over. Would you be willing to try this now? Would you be willing to practice saying this now? Because that would really meet my needs for connection and a sense of hope and possibility that we can communicate. All right? The cool thing is, and here is it's like the magical thing that you can ask for that could head off almost any argument. It's fucking amazing. And it's called a connection request. And in particular, it's these words. I express myself. I tell somebody, here's my observation. When I see you walk in the house with your shoes muddy, I feel frustrated because I really value order and beauty in the house, and I want support. Now, here's the magic words. Can you tell me what you're hearing me say? Can you tell me what you're hearing me say? This is, it's truly fucking magical when you can actually ask somebody what they're hearing. Because no matter how compassionate, no matter how much bullshit you get out of your own self-expression, we're constantly hearing messages filtered through our own sort of shit, our own bullshit. And so when you ask somebody for a reflection of what they're hearing, you get clear about whether the message you intended to convey is the one that they actually got. It's amazing. It does two things. Number one, you get to hear. Did they hear me? Did they hear what I wanted them to hear? Number two, you slow down the interaction a little bit and start paying attention to the process. And that is a huge learning curve in no bullshit communication, is that communication is a process as much or more than the content. You start paying attention to the process of our communication. You start slowing things down to make sure that everybody's on the same page, understanding what we're saying. These words, I ask you to experiment with these words. Will you tell me what you're hearing me say? Would you be willing to tell me what you're hearing me say? I can't repeat it enough times, and I can't tell you how many times it has supported connection in a moment where I could have easily gotten disconnected with somebody. Okay? Another kind of connection request. So we talked about action requests. Another kind of connection request is to ask about the inner world of the person you're talking to. Can you tell me what comes up for you when I say that? That's another very important process question. It's about a dialogue and a discovery process. It turns what could be just another sort of iteration of the same conversation over and over into a process of discovery. Yeah, I noticed that, when you interrupted me this morning at breakfast, I just like shut down and felt so resentful because I so value being heard. Can you tell me what's coming up for you just hearing that? How powerful is it to really invite somebody to come forward and share their reality with you? Now, if you're asking how it is, hopefully you're ready to hear how it is for them and listen deeply to how it is for them. And we're going to get to that next. But often one of the most profound ways to be heard is to hear somebody out. And it's a paradox. It's one of the many paradoxes in this process. We don't always want to hear somebody out, but if you want to be heard, it can so often grease the skids of empathy to actually give that listening and that empathy to another person. So asking for shit. You can ask for actions, you can ask for a reflection, and you can ask for somebody to respond or share what's coming up for them. Oftentimes I find that doing these asking for a reflection and asking for a response can be a great way to grease the skids for asking for a specific action, or it becomes this dialogue and an exploration about how to get your needs met. It's no longer like I have to come up with this strategy. It's like, are you willing to have a conversation with me and explore some ways that we could maybe both get our needs met here? Because that's the game winner. That's the game winner, is when we can all get our needs met, right? Your needs matter, my needs matter. We both care about each other's needs. How are we going to get our needs met here? So we've addressed the possibilities of a request. And I'd like to invite you to imagine a conversation with this person who you've taken the time to write a little bit about, whose behavior you've observed thus, who you've had these feelings about that experience and recognized what needs are up for you. Now, what is a request that you can craft that would help you get your needs met? I want you to imagine how a conversation might go if you expressed your needs to this person and asked for a reflection. I want you to imagine as vividly as you can how a conversation might go if you were asking for some response from them. asking them to let you know how they might be feeling. And I want you to also ask yourself, what is a request, an action request that I could make that might get my needs met? And while you do that, I'm going to take some action on behalf of the tea that is coursing through my body right now. I'll be right back. Excellent. So at this point, we're gonna talk a bit about one more essential, like maybe again, like the most important part of the model, and I really want to welcome questions. There is a question and answer tab that you can open and start asking questions if that's alive for you. Has anything got you scratching your head, or you're just like, that's fucking bullshit, or that's impossible, or anything that I moved through too quickly and you'd like to hear more about? I want to encourage you to go ahead and ask a few questions before we move into the empathy portion of the model. And I just want to acknowledge a little bit of a sense of limitation with this platform. I thought that this platform was going to show me who's with me and give me opportunities to invite people to sort of speak live and ask questions over the platform. But that's not what this one does. And for that reason, I probably won't use it again, but this has been a really great exploration. But I also look forward to hearing any feedback that you have about the platform itself, and how and whether it's met your needs, how it's been good, how it's felt limited to you. So I'm not seeing any questions pop up just yet, but I'm also I'm trusting that that we will have questions and you guys will share them as they arise, and I'll do my best to address them. So let's move on to the fifth and sort of monumental. Oh yay! Looks like we do have a question coming online here, so I'm going to wait a moment. I've got some folks who aren't tuned in on Google Plus, and so I've invited people who do have questions to shoot me messages on Facebook. And as I wait for that question, I will just take a couple of breaths and trust that everything is just as it needs to be. One of the things I'm really curious about is that it appears in this platform. Awesome. I've got one request to review the different kinds of requests. And there are essentially two categories of requests. There are action requests and there are connection requests. And thank you, Ashley, for the question, because I hadn't quite made the categorical distinction. Action requests are, can you do this now? Or can you do this by 3 o'clock on Saturday? This concrete thing that we're both going to know whether you did it. A connection request is either a request for a reflection, can you tell me what you're hearing me say, or a request for some information about how that what you're sharing stimulates in the other person. So a reflection request or a response request. Can you tell me what you're hearing me say, or can you tell me what comes up in you? Or you can ask more specifically, what do you think about that? You're going to get at something about their thoughts. How do you feel about that? You're going to get something about how they feel, or you're going to get some sort of faux emotion, maybe. Um, so, um, so those are essentially, you can really be specific about the kinds of connection requests that you make. Can you tell me what you're hearing me say? Can you tell me how you feel when you hear that? Can you tell me what comes up for you is a more open-ended kind of question. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if it was, and I'm happy to clarify anything that came up. I got Evie's question. So Evie says, there are these men who come into my job and I can't stand the way they interact with me, but I'm not sure a camera would catch it. My best so far is, quote, when you are here working with another clerk and you want to engage with me and tell me jokes, I feel angry because I need dignity and choice and understanding and to matter. So clearly there's something about the way that these interactions are going that is triggering for you. You feel angry. And is it, I'm guessing I heard you say needing dignity and choice and understanding and to matter. So I'm guessing that there's some observable behavior that's going on there. Like when you start talking to me without asking if I am available to connect, is that one observable behavior that might be happening in the situation? Yeah. So wanting to be seen as a human being doing your own thing and your own work, and that you're not there to entertain somebody else. So yeah, really wanting to be seen for your choice and your humanity. And I'm guessing that there's that observable behavior of engaging you in a conversation and without asking if you are interested in talking or engaging. And so I'm really curious if you would be willing to come up with a request around that observation and that recognition that you're needing some acknowledgement of your choice. What's a request, Evie, that you could make in that situation that might get your needs met? Because I'm fairly confident that whoever these people are, they're not consciously wanting to dehumanize you, right? I don't think most of us are not really in the business of dehumanizing people on purpose, but we're often fairly unconscious of our impact on other people. And that's one of the amazing things about no bullshit communication, Tong Fu, is we actually start giving people authentic responses. Like, here's really me. Here's how my actual experience when you're you. Yeah, awesome. One request Evie came up with, would you be willing to give me some space right now? I'm choosing to focus on my work right now. Awesome. That's totally doable. And yeah, and you could even define space. Would you be willing to talk to somebody else right now? I'm really focused on my work right now. Or yeah, I notice that when you come up and start talking to me, I start feeling frustrated because I want to be known for, and I want to have choice about how I interact with you. Would you be willing, next time you want to talk to me, to ask me if I'm up for having a conversation? Or you could even practice that right now. That would feel so good. And I know this sounds so awkward, right? Like, let's not pretend that totally breaking the script is not totally awkward and requires a certain amount of courage. And that's one of the powerful things that we can engage when we're practicing no bullshit communication is we are breaking the script. We're totally breaking the rules of interaction when we start talking about our feelings and our present moment experience. When we start actually owning our experience and asking for what we want, many of these things are breaking the rules. And that's pretty fucking exciting, and it can be very scary as well. And I want to acknowledge that it's baby steps and we do what we can. But what I wanted to come back to is just recognizing that that most people are actually really keen on doing things that meet your needs when they feel like they're doable, and when they feel like it's there's a sense of respect in being seen, you know, because I'm sure that these whoever these guys are just wanting to connect, just wanting connection, or just wanting some self-expression or whatever it is, right? They're having their precious universal human needs, and they're unconscious of the impact that they're having. So when we can make somebody conscious of their impact and ask for specific behaviors, we're so far ahead of the game. And our world can become more interconnected. That's the irony of this whole game of radical responsibility, is when I take radical responsibility for my experience, then we actually become more interconnected. When I own my experience of frustration and I take action to get my needs met, then we become more interdependently woven. We're not just like unconscious sort of automatons smacking into each other in the night. We're sort of consciously navigating this thing called relationship, because you're dreaming your own dream and I'm dreaming my own dream, but we're in relationship with one another. And we can do that consciously. So thank you, Evie. Yeah, these frustrating ongoing interactions can lead to these generalizations like men are terrible, or they're so blind or unconscious, or whatever it is. When we actually start sort of recognizing that we only know what we know, and we're always doing our best to meet our needs given the resources at hand. Now, my resources today may be a lot lower than they were yesterday, or a lot higher than they were yesterday, based on what I had for breakfast, what's going on in my relationship, what a virus that I might have. Like, there's all kinds of things, fluctuations in my level of resources. But I'm always doing my best with the resources I have. I never look back and I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't do my best. Have you ever just not done your best? See, the funny thing is we can all remember a time when we were like, that wasn't my best, or I was lazy, or whatever it is. But actually, lazy was your best in that moment. What you're calling lazy, or what you're calling shrinking away from doing your best, was the best you had in that moment. So that's part of this whole thing about loving what is and about meeting what is with compassion. So much of no bullshit communication is getting rid of this whole theory called should, that there's such a thing as should, that the past could ever be different than it was. It could never have been different than it was. The past is exactly as it is. The only thing we can do is move forward. And the extent to which we imagine that I or you or he or she should have done something different in the past, then we are suffering on an illusion. We are focusing our energy on futility, and we're believing something that just isn't true. Because whether you're living in this world where they did what they did, or you're living in the world of string theory where there's actually several alternate realities happening simultaneously where they did something different, but you're in this timeline, either way, you can't go back. We don't have the technology now. All you can do is move forward. So bringing our energy into the present and building from this present moment is so powerful. But when we superimpose this idea of should, what should be happening or what should have happened, we're actually in this boxing match with reality. And guess what? God always wins. What is way more potent and way more powerful than what we think it should be. Sorry. That's just the way it is. So bullshit. Get rid of the bullshit. It will definitely improve your whole world. But if we don't have any more questions about what we've already reviewed, I'd like to go into this beautiful segue, which Evie sort of supported me with, which is how do I listen? We've been talking a lot about self-expression, which is one very important part of communication. But the other very important part of communication is how I listen. And in particular, we want to talk about empathic listening, because there's this thing that we do where we generalize and we make it about us. Whatever's happening out there, it's about me. It's about us. And again, everybody's dreaming their own dream. And they're dreaming it the best they can with the resources that they have. But we all share the same basic set of needs. So when I can bring, like, the essence is to bring an empathic awareness to every interaction that I have. And that's this basic awareness, this fundamental awareness that we're dreaming different dreams and we're all doing the best we can. That we're all doing the best we can to meet the same basic needs. And when I can become curious about anybody in any situation, about what needs is this person trying to meet here, that's a way more, not only is it a much more sort of gentle, compassionate, often like effective way of relating and living inside of my own mind. But it also, again, it's more effective. I'm kind of being redundant. But it feels good to be curious rather than to be in like defensive reaction about what this person is doing or saying. And it actually becomes an exploration, and it's like, boom, the world takes off into this sense of like a unknown exploration of possibility. How curious. Another possible response in Evie's situation, when men come into her workplace and engage with her when she's wanting to get her work done, she could express, when you walk in and start talking to me without asking me if I have the space to, be in a conversation, I feel angry and frustrated. I'm wanting to be seen for my humanity and for my choice. Would you be willing to give me some space, please? Or would you be willing to ask me before you just start talking to me if I'm available to talk? So that's self-expression with a doable request. Boom. There's also the possibility of empathy. Looks like you're really wanting to connect right now, yeah? It's just like that. What's motivating this person? What's this precious human need underneath this behavior that might be really frustrating for me? Looks like you're really wanting some connection right now. Just acknowledging that is one way to open up the space for our needs to actually be heard more fully. Wow, sounds like you're really wanting to connect right now. I notice I'm feeling a little frustrated because I'm really wanting to be in choice about where I put my attention. Boom. Sometimes empathy can be the quickest one-line moment, but it can make all the difference in the world. But again, the essence of listening is listening for the universal human needs. Because if all we're doing is looking at the content of people's behaviors and their strategies, often it can just be a pretty bleary, tragic world. But when we recognize that everybody all the time is really trying to belong, is trying to be heard, is trying to communicate or connect, is trying to feel a sense of power, all of these things are just universal human experiences. And when we connect with that experience, we do something very powerful, which is we short circuit our tendency to take their actions personally and make them some reflection of my value, like they are actually meaning something about me. That's the exciting thing about radical responsibility. It's the paradox, because everything you say is about you. Everything you do is actually about you. When I get that deeply, then there's nothing you can do or say that's going to hook me into having to defend some aspect of me from you. And let's face it, most of our interactions are not like violent interactions where people are attacking us physically in a way that we have to like defend ourselves. Those happen, and I'm not saying they don't happen. And I'm also would advocate powerfully that Tung Fu can actually diffuse a lot of those situations before they become violent. But it's amazing the degree to which having empathy for somebody can bring a tremendous amount of ease into our own nervous system, because empathy is different than sympathy. I want to distinguish it from sympathy. Sympathy is like, you're sad, oh, I'm sad, I'm sympathizing with you. Empathy is, oh, you're sad, oh, you're sad, yeah, I've been sad before, I know what that's like. Yeah, it's being present to somebody's process and experience, which is a like radical distinction from all of the other things that we often try to do when somebody brings us their experience, trying to fix it, trying to talk them out of it, trying to minimize it, trying to sort of take the stage and talk about our experience that was worse or better. There are so many things that are not empathic responses. I want to invite you to sort of look at the world through the eyes of, what are the precious needs that I'm witnessing? Because it's such a liberated place. And that doesn't mean that when you're in a relationship and somebody's giving you sharing their heart with you about some actions that you've taken that brought up a lot of pain, that doesn't mean that you don't self-reflect and check in and see, wow, was I unaware of something? Or am I in integrity? Was that action in integrity with my values? If it was, then cool. There's no adjustments to be made on your end. You can just hold space for this person and listen. If there are adjustments, if you can be like, oh yeah, that wasn't really in alignment with my value for care or my value for listening, then you can acknowledge that. But what they're saying is about them. And then your work is about staying in integrity with you and not taking responsibility for their experience. It's such a beautiful, powerful, fine line that gets less and less fine as you practice more empathic listening and acknowledging these different dreams that we're navigating and the way our dreams get to bump into each other. So, listening. And I'll tell you what, empathic listening is a practice. Like all of these things are a practice. But the simplest version of listening is just active listening, is just reflecting what you're hearing. Somebody brings something to you. Instead of reacting, if you just had one habit that you built into your life, it would be, so what I'm hearing you say is this. That's it. Reflecting back for them what they just said. Is that what you were meaning? Okay. Not only does that clarify, because sometimes, again, the bullshit delivery service can get in the way of how we hear people. Not only does it clarify the message that we're both actually talking about the same message, but it also slows the interaction down a step. So you can take a moment to breathe in and take in this person's humanity before you have whatever response it is that you want to give. So it can also give you time to check in, like, what is this person needing? What feelings are up for this person? Empathic listening, reflections like that are about reflecting the content of what they're saying. Empathic listening is about listening for the feelings and the needs. It's about attending to the storyteller more than you're attending to the story. And these are powerful practices. These are things that we can do. This is Tung Fu. This is the practice, the practical application of the best communication techniques that we know of to really dissolve and diffuse so much of the conflicts that arise that are based basically on how we're communicating or not communicating about what's really going on. So that's a little bit on empathy. I'd love, again, just to fire off any questions that you have about this, any life situations that you have that this applies to, that you're feeling a little confounded around. And I can address those as best I can. And while you're thinking about it, And while I'm thinking about what I'm about to say, I just want to talk for a moment about practice, and specifically about this thing called authenticity. Because having been practicing and learning and devoted to teaching nonviolent communication, and now this bullshit, no bullshit communication, I've heard from many people that their gripe with nonviolent communication is how inauthentic it is. And um, and I have some things to say about that, because number one, on authenticity, anything that we learn or in a learning process of, or even, and I'll just back up a step and say, even practitioners who are learning nonviolent communication will say it just doesn't feel authentic to talk this way. Of fucking course it doesn't feel authentic to talk this way. You're learning a new language. How authentic does it feel to talk in a language you're just learning? How authentic does it feel to play an instrument that you're just learning how to play? How authentic does it feel to do completely new dance steps that you've never done before? You're practicing these dance steps or this new style of dance. Anything that you are learning is different than your learned behavior. And so what we've been practicing for a very long time, the bullshit that we've been practicing, feels very authentic. It's just habitual. But when we're learning something new, we're going to go through an awkward phase for sure. And it's going to feel what we might be tempted to call inauthentic. But what it is just awkward. Because you wouldn't say that it's inauthentic, that my playing the guitar badly because it's my third lesson is inauthentic. You would say, oh, you're learning how to play the guitar and you sound like shit. you know? So that's just part of the learning curve. Now, the challenge is that with communication, we have all of these habits that do feel authentic. And when we're trying something new, we're, like I said before, breaking the rules. We're taking a risk because we kind of have a sense of the known outcomes of doing what we always do. We don't know what the outcomes are going to be, and we're doing something totally different. So people who are used to a certain version of us might not get that version and might have their aversion to that version. I don't know. But in essence, we can't get away. We can practice guitar in sort of like the privacy of our own bedroom, but we don't so much get to practice new ways of communicating in the privacy of our own bedroom, except when we do the practice techniques, which I will gladly share, which like any system of learning, there are just repetition. Repetition makes you better. 10,000 hours of practice makes you the master, or whatever. And so there are the forms that we practice. And then there's ultimately those forms are getting us to a place where like the movements become so natural that we no longer have to practice a form and we can express the essence of the movement. It's like with dance or with martial arts. You do 10,000 punches, you learn your katas, your forms, and then ultimately at a certain point you've practiced so much that movement just flows out of you so naturally and so easily, so authentically, right? But it takes repetition to get to that point. There's nothing that you've done that didn't take lots of repetition and struggle and awkwardness to get to where you are. Maybe like sucking on a boob is about like the only like behavior that you were just good at, like right out of the womb, So that's my little rant on authenticity, because I think it's a real stumbling block for some people to expect that this is going to have these sudden dramatic results, or expect that it's just going to feel natural and comfortable right from the start. But we have these forms that help us along. So the form for self-expression is basically, when I observe blank, I feel blank, because I really value blank. Would you be willing to blank? I mean, that's the form. That's the structure. You take situation after situation, moment after moment, interaction after interaction, and you plug in the blanks. What are you observing? How are you feeling? What's the need that's up for you? What's the request that you want to make? And in the same way, we have a form for empathy. The question that you get to ask as an exploration, not to be right, but as a way of checking in. Oh, are you feeling blank because you're needing blank? So we practice. And the best way to practice is to actually join a practice group, join a group of people who are doing this, get some coaching around it, join a safe space to make mistakes. Because that's all that these practice groups are, is a safe space to make mistakes, to do it badly. I love one of my favorite quotes from Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent communication. He says, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And I think that's just fucking brilliant, because it's true. Do it badly, but find a safe place to do it badly. One of those safe places can be a practice group. One of those safe places can be a 6-week training like the one that I'll be offering very soon. One of those safe places might be an empathy buddy or a partner in learning. I don't necessarily recommend taking your sort of life partner or romantic partner as your empathy practice partner, because there's too much live stuff between the two of you, and it could get dicey, and you could get in over your heads. Practice empathy with somebody who you don't have a charge with, who's also just there to practice and learn. One of the most powerful practices, if you want to really transform your capacity to meet the world empathically, to really just, it's literally like fucking bullshit filter. It's amazing how easily from a state of empathy you can filter out so much of the bullshit that people are swallowing and trying to spoon feed you. The most simple, fantastic practice you can do is to find an empathy buddy and have a half-hour phone call or an hour-long phone call once a week, and literally split the time in half. One of you talks about your shit, and the other one just gives empathy. Are you feeling this way because you're needing this? An exploration of using the language and applying the language of feeling and applying the language of needs. What are you needing? Are you feeling this way because you're needing this? Are you feeling this because you're needing this? Oh, is it that you're really valuing this? Is it that you really want this? And by this, I mean precious universal human needs. Because again, if we're guessing about somebody's needs but putting a strategy in place of those needs, then again we're connecting their feelings to some specific outcome in the world, and that's not what it's about. It's about coming home to our needs. It's about coming home to an awareness of what it is that's precious to us, and connecting with potential strategies to get those needs met after we've connected deeply with the needs. And when we make empathy guesses, we don't do it to be right. It's not about getting it right. It's about being curious and guessing, making an attempt to connect in that way. So it's 8:33 to be exact, and I'm having a fucking great time. I'm super curious about your guys' feedback on what's happened so far. If there's anything that's been really exciting for you to hear or really kind of been an aha, I'd love to hear about that. If there's something that has given you a real challenge to sort of wrap your mind around, or you find you're experiencing a lot of resistance to the experiment, I'd love to hear about that. If you've got a situation in your life that you're like, this is going on and I just have no idea how to apply this, I'd love to hear about that. You can pop open the questions column, send a question to me, or you can message me on Facebook and ask any question you like or share any response. I'm also while you are mustering your questions and responses, I will tell you that I've got a course coming up. I'm offering a 6-week online course. I'm going to be using the Zoom platform for that, which is going to be a lot more interactive, and we'll be able to get into breakout groups and do little like dyads and triads during the process. And I'm really, really excited about this course. It's the art of no bullshit communication, a 6-week immersion in Tung Fu. And we're going to do 6 weeks that'll include lots of materials, lots of formats for you to take some of these things and really apply them to your life in a systematic way. We're going to move through the principles in a much more sort of focused way and really sort of work with pieces one at a time and start really identifying some of the bullshit practices that you notice happening in your own life, and start translating and transforming some of the bullshit into that compost that's going to feed the garden. Because this is not about editing the world and being a good person. It's not about being nice. Fuck, it's not about being nice. That's why I'm here doing the no bullshit communication thing, because there's just such a misconception about trying to be nice, or this sense of codependency, trying to take care of everybody's feelings and make sure everybody feels okay. Not my responsibility. Not my responsibility, but I can get super curious, and it's a really radically alive thing to be in this process of taking ownership and seeing our patterns and trying out new things. So the 6-week immersion is going to include, like I said, materials. It's going to include some awesome sort of self-application stuff. It's going to include opportunities to do some radical experiments in authenticity and connection in the world, and then come back to the group and share, like, how was it to try this out in the world, and how was your practice? And we will sort of pair off into empathy partnerships, and you'll get an opportunity to go deep with somebody once a week and just practice giving and receiving empathy. Giving and receiving this form of listening that is such a fundamental, powerful form of listening. Because the fact is that every war that's ever started with bullshit. That every faction that ever splintered on bullshit. That it's bullshit that makes all the violence in this world possible. It's ultimately a failure of empathy from all sides. And so my mission is to get empathy happening in the world, to get people cleaning up their bullshit so our relationships can fire and be supportive of our dreams, to get people communicating about their differences in ways that are respectful, dialogical, rather than ideological war, so that we can start really becoming a more unified humanity, even notwithstanding all of the precious differences and all of the important differences that we do have. And that's my mission here, and I hope that you guys have really enjoyed. Getting some great feedback from Evie. I want to share. Hope you guys have really enjoyed getting a chance to explore. Evie says, things that have stood out for me are the camera can't catch a pattern or motivations. That's right. When we make observations, we have to surrender this idea that we are seeing a pattern or we know somebody's motivation. And it's really an inner orientation. It's a letting go of thinking that we know and entering into a process of exploration. I don't know anything about what's going on over there. I really don't. What I know about is what's going on in here. And that's my feelings and what's precious to me. And then, given that, are you willing to try this with me? And would really meet my needs? Are you willing to have a conversation or engage with me? This is the essence. I don't know what's going on over there. And every time I tell myself I do know, I have just split the world in half, created more separation, more likelihood of conflict. I've hardened in my gut. When I let go of thinking I know about what's up over there, talk about what I've seen and how I feel and what my needs are, oh man, things get rich quick. But the thing is, and I know that I advertise this as a free course, and unfortunately it's just not, because if you've taken any of what I've said seriously, this is going to cost you some of your bullshit. This is going to cost you some of that precious bullshit that you have bought into for a long time. And that, my friend, can feel really costly. It can be excruciating. It can feel very exposed and vulnerable to no longer be able to rely on our judgments, our moralistic judgments of other people, our sense of knowing, intuitively knowing what's going on for other people. It can cost you your ability to make your experience somebody else's fault. It can cost you precious excuses. And I understand that, and I have compassion for you. And I'm doing a happy dance if you lose some of that shit, because it's uncomfortable, but it's just bullshit. And there's so much more waiting for us when we step into a world where we don't know what's going to happen next, where it's an exploration. And it's not just a solo, it's actually a shared journey of exploring and discovering together what's going on here. Whoa, I notice I'm feeling this. I think it's about really needing this. Like, what comes up for you hearing that? Wow, like I noticed that this is going on for me. And then when we can share in a place of like mutual exploration, oh, such richness can be discovered in our own interiors and in the process of that interdependence and interweaving. So thank you for those that feedback, Evie, because it's really helped me riff. Generalizations leave you powerless because they camouflage choices. Absolutely. Yep. And they make things all of a sudden global rather than local. I can take care of things that are local. Global phenomena is it's too big. I feel powerless, or I feel overwhelmed personally when I try to address a global phenomena, like my life is falling apart. But if I can address like, wow, there's stuff all over the floor in my living room, and there's rotten food in my fridge, and I can take care of these observable things one at a time, and actually start to do things about the quality of my life, and take power step by step, concrete choice by concrete choice, to make them better. Yeah. And then being concrete when you ask for space. What does space look like? Would you be willing to take 3 steps back and turn around and face the other way? Like, how bold can you become in your requests? How much are you willing to take a risk to ask for exactly what you want, but do it in a way that's somehow playing the game? Because here's the thing. Anybody who's good at sort of observing systems can come in and watch you do your habitual thing and tell you what the rules of the game that you've been playing are. We're all playing a game. We're all playing language games. All of our relationships are a complex series of language games, and they all have rules. And people who are really good at sort of seeing patterns can actually do the empirical research, can track the things that you do objectively, the observables, and actually come up with statistically relevant patterning and come up with the rules of your game. But are those rules conscious? Are you conscious of the rules that you're playing by? And whose rules are they? Are they your mom's rules, your dad's rules? Are they ancestral? Are they the culture's at large's rules? Or are they the rules that you've chosen? The cool thing about about no bullshit communication is that you're now choosing to be accountable to a set of rules that you are experimenting with consciously. And when my communication pattern or process is actually accountable to something that's not just me and how I feel, and then there's a potential for contrast and growth. All right, because we are dreaming our own dream, and it can be so very subjective. But when we create something concrete, when we take on a set of sort of rules of the game, if you will, and nobody likes rules. Well, some of us do, actually. Nobody likes rules, I understand. But when you take on consciously playing by these rules, then it becomes very clear when you're not. And that's what I love about how fucking practical this no bullshit communication is. Tung Fu is. It is practical. You know when you're playing by the rules, and you know when you're not. And sometimes you're conscious of it, and sometimes you're not. But it's very easy to be accountable. The other thing I'll say is that you've probably, if you're just being introduced to this, you've probably learned just enough to become the biggest asshole in your community when it comes to correcting everybody on their tung fu. That's not an observation. Is that a request? That's not a feeling. So what I really want to encourage you to do is focus on practicing yourself. Focus on bringing your language and your thoughts into alignment with observations, feelings, needs, requests, and empathy. That's it. You are totally covering your own bases, holding yourself accountable to these standards, because it's much sort of easier to try to hold other people accountable to those standards, and they may or may not be sort of in agreement that that's what they want in the first place. So rather than go out and start educating everybody on their bullshit, I would really encourage you to focus exclusively, and I mean exclusively. Please don't go being the bullshit police in your relationship now. Exclusively on your own patterns. Own it. Own this process, because it's not about changing anybody else. It's about becoming more authentically, more integrally yourself. So I gave myself until 9 o'clock, but I'm feeling pretty complete. So unless somebody pops in with some juicy questions or feedback, I'm going to take probably another 5 minutes and sign off. But I will make sure and get you a link to the page where you can read more about the Art of No Bullshit Communication, a 6-week immersion in Tung Fu, baby, because it's going to be fun. We're going to laugh. We're going to connect. We're going to have some deeply vulnerable experiences. People might cry and shit, but it's going to be really good. And you're going to come out of it with an experiential sort of contrast and some real practices that you can take into your daily life, practicing this stuff on paper, in the real world, doing some experiments and getting some data for yourself about this. So please don't believe anything I've told you. Just go out and experiment with it, because that's the best possible feedback you're going to get. Just be a radical empiricist and bring it right into your field with some actual experimentation. And so grateful for everybody who tuned in tonight. And I'm going to be running this class and getting better and better and better at it. Honestly, like, you guys have been guinea pigs, and I'm so grateful for you. And I'd love feedback about how I could make this class better from you, either here or offline in some way. But I'm just going to keep honing this and offer this monthly. I'm going to be doing this class on a monthly basis, and then also on the every 4 weeks I'll do this class, and then I'm also in 2 weeks going to offer a special topic class that's specifically about listening skills and about empathy and practicing empathy. And so I'm going to do the Tung Fu basics every 4 weeks, and then I'm going to do a special topic every 4 weeks that are staggered in between 2 weeks. So you guys will all get invites for all that stuff, and I'm really excited. Please, if you haven't yet, go like the Ordinary Awakening page, because then you'll get updates on some of the things that I'm offering. And the 6-week course starts in February. I believe it's February 23rd, and we're going to be running that for 6 Tuesdays straight from 7 to 9. I'm also very curious about your experience of the platform. I'd really appreciate anybody's feedback, whether you're watching on Google Plus and able to make comments, or whether you're watching on YouTube. I'd love to hear what your experience is. It seems like no matter when you join the class, you actually start at the beginning. That was my experience, and please tell me if I'm wrong. If you did join late, if you had an experience of starting right from the beginning, or whether it just brought you in wherever we were and wherever I was in the presentation. I'm curious about that, and I'm going to be running, like I said, I think the rest of these courses, and definitely my 6-week immersion and 8-week immersion in the next level group on a Zoom platform, which is a platform where everybody's kind of present visually in the space. You can turn your camera off and turn your microphone off so people can't see you if you don't want to be seen. But I would be curious about any feedback you have about this and how you feel about a platform like that for joining these kinds of talks. So please feel free to shoot me a chat message or a Google Hangout message, or shoot me something in the questions page here, or something on Facebook. Shoot me a Facebook message. All kinds of ways to get in touch. And thank you for taking the time tonight. It's been such a pleasure being with you virtually in this way. And I will have this up on my YouTube page. I'm gonna put it up on Facebook as well. I'm gonna make this available publicly, at least until the next offering that I make. So if you really enjoyed this and think that somebody in your life would benefit from it, I would love it if you would have them point them to the link. Oh, and then of course, like the other shameless plug that I almost totally forgot to do is that my work is doing this with individuals and couples and families and in organizations. That's how I make a living. I make a living by helping people sort of transform their relationships, starting with themselves, taking ownership of their lives, and dreaming up the most fucking passionately purposeful life that they can imagine, and take and taking that to the next level. So I just absolutely love spending time with people in these intimate settings. I do a lot of work over, most of my work is virtual. It's over Zoom or Skype, and it has a great impact. So I will definitely, there's a link to my website on my page here in Google, and it's ordinaryawakening.net, www.ordinaryawakening.net. Feel free to check out my website, get in touch with me there. I would be delighted to give you a free half-hour session just connecting and exploring what the possibilities are and helping you through any sort of communication or relationship conflict that you may be experiencing. So please take me up on a free half-hour of my expertise. It would be a pleasure of mine. And this is Joshua Hathaway signing off. Thank you. Enjoy the awakening, everyone.